Hello, I'm Fia and I'm 26 years old. I had a very hard life growing up. My dad did not make it any easier for me, and in fact was the source of all the troubles I had. But recently karma came back to him so hard I can't help but laugh. So allow me to share my story with you. Everything began with my mom passing away. Before that, we were your normal, average American family. My dad, Hector, doted on my older brother, Sean, a little more, but he never really played favorites. But after my mom passed away when I was 12 and my brother was 18, things took a bad turn, to say the very least. Suddenly, my dad was always picking on me. Not for any other reason, but because Sean didn't like it. I had to do everything in a manner that would not upset Sean, or I would get grounded. Dad would never say a word against Sean if he did something bad. In fact, he'd find a way to somehow blame that on me. As I grew older, my dad began making me do all the household chores. Keep in mind that he never once asked Sean to do it. He'd let Sean do whatever he wanted, and God forbid Sean did something himself, because if he did, Dad would get mad at me for making Sean work so hard. When I turned 15, Dad had me find a job because he was apparently tired of paying for me. However, of course, he was never tired of paying for any of Sean's things. Hell, he never even asked Sean to get a job, even though he was a grown adult by this point. I kept my mouth shut and found myself a job. However, I could barely keep or use any money that I had left over because Sean would ask me to give it to him. If I said no, Dad would get upset with me and threaten to take all of my money. So, by this point, not only was I studying in school, but I was also juggling work and household chores. I was exhausted, and it was beginning to show in the way that I was constantly falling sick. Dad never cared enough about it, except, and I vividly remember this, when one day he got my report card. "I got your report card." "Oh, that's good. How did I do?" "Care to explain why you got a B in history?" "Well, I was sick a few weeks ago, remember? I couldn't make the deadline for an assignment because of it." "That is not a valid reason at all." "What do you want me to say? That's the only reason I have." "You're grounded." "What? That's not fair." "What's not fair is me working my head off to give you a good education and you not delivering good results." "That's not true at all. A B is hardly a bad grade. Besides, Sean never brought home grades that were anything above a C. You never grounded him." "He's different." "I know, and you show that to me every single day. You let Sean get away with a lot because he's your favorite. If I did even a quarter of the things Sean did, you'd ground me for life." "Maybe you'd be my favorite if you actually showed me that you had something to favor." "Excuse me? I did everything around this house while studying and working. Sean does nothing but play his stupid video games all day long. You're being very mean." "You don't get to talk to me like that. You're doing what you have to do. Your brother is going through a rough time, and it's disgusting that you're putting him down for it." "Sean got fired from his job for stealing. How is he going through a rough time?" "I have not raised you to go against your family like this. If I hear another word against Sean, I will ground you for 2 more weeks." "I wish Mom was here. She'd definitely give you hell for how you're treating me." I stormed over to my room with tears in my eyes. I had never said a word against Dad before, when he used to be hypocritical. But that day, I just snapped and talked back to him. I mean, what was it going to matter anyway? I was grounded, so I might as well let him know about how I felt. After that, I would just talk back to my dad and Sean. I was beginning to see that ever since I started talking back, they backed off a little. That didn't mean that they stopped yelling at me. Sean realized that if he just complained to my dad instead of talking to me, I'd get punished. So that's what he started doing. I'd have no idea if I did something wrong until Dad came back home from work. He got to a point where I was constantly anxious and tried my best to stay out of Sean's way. But that did not end well. It was a week before my finals when I got kicked out. That day I informed Dad that I would be spending my day studying at the library. Dad barely bothered, so I went. And when I came back, Dad was very angry. Where were you? At the library. I was studying for my finals. I told you this. No, you didn't. Right before I left for school, I dropped by your room to tell you that. You were on your phone at that time and you replied with, whatever. I don't talk like that. Dad, I'm really tired. Can I please just go to bed? No. Do you know what you've done? Huh? No. I had my big interview today. Oh yeah? How was it? I couldn't go because of you. Because of me? How did you draw that conclusion? I asked you to wash my blazer and work pants, and today I found them at the bottom of the laundry pile and they smelled so bad. No amount of deodorant or perfume took away that smell. Which meant that he couldn't go for his interview. First of all, I asked you to give me the clothes you wanted to get washed for weeks. You never gave them to me. Secondly, couldn't you have borrowed something from Dad? Dad has a lot of suits and pants and you guys are practically the same size. We didn't ask for your nonsense solutions right now. This is about you being irresponsible. So what if Sean didn't give you the blazer? Couldn't you have gone into his room and taken it? The last time I did that, he got mad at me and then you yelled at me for violating his privacy. What was I supposed to do, huh? You just always have a convenient excuse, don't you? You need to pay up for the job you cost me. What do you mean? I didn't do anything. Exactly, you didn't do anything. And you know what? I'm tired of you never doing things right. You're worthless. You've done nothing but make things worse for us. What? I don't want you living with us anymore. I want you out, first thing in the morning. But I've nowhere to go. I have no money. You can't kick me out. Well, tough. You should have thought about that before ruining your brother's future. You can't blame me for his mistakes. You can't keep taking his side forever. When will you learn that I'm not taking sides? All I'm seeing is you being jealous of your brother, and so you're sabotaging him. And that is not something I'm okay with. I told you before that family comes first, and what you did today showed me that you don't believe that. If family come first, then you wouldn't be kicking your teenage daughter out of the house for something she did not do. That is enough. Now go to your room. I don't want to see your face anymore. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Dad was kicking me out, all because I didn't wash Sean's clothes. I had no money to my name whatsoever. In fact, what little money I had left over from my last pay, Sean took it from me just the previous day. I went up to my room and just sobbed. I felt like crap because I did everything I could to please both of them, and the one time I was in the right, Dad called me worthless and resorted to throwing me out. The thought of being homeless began to make me panic. My mind went to a lot of dark places very fast. I could barely breathe. But I somehow remembered my Aunt Vivian. She was the only person who actually understood me. Vivian is my dad's younger sister, and she lived half an hour away from us, and she was my rock after my mom died. She hated the way that my dad and brother treated me, and so she would help me out in any way she could. She would let me stay over at her place for 1 week a month just to give me a break from the toxic environment of my home. Of course, I would come back home to an absolute mess that I would be required to clean by the end of the day, but that was worth the mental break I got when I went away. I'm so grateful that I managed to remember her in my moment of panic, because if I didn't, I think I would have made some pretty bad decisions at that point. I called her and told her everything that had happened through sobs, and she was appalled at my dad. But she told me that she would take care of me. She told me that I was more than welcome to live with her if I wanted, and I took her up on that offer. I actually slept really well for the first time in a long while because I was happy that I was going to be away from my dad and brother. The next morning, Aunt Vivian showed up at the door while I was packing my things. Dad answered the door. Vivian, what are you doing here? You're throwing Thea out? Ugh, what sob story did she tell you? You have no idea how she messed up this time. I think I do. You're throwing her out because she didn't wash Sean's clothes for his interview. Yeah, can you believe it? That girl does nothing all day, and when we ask her to do one thing, she either never does it or she messes it up. I'm tired of it. Sean's also been so upset about it that he's locked himself up in his room. What do you mean that they don't do anything? That girl is working herself to the bone because of you. I bet that's one of the many lies she's fed you. Look, this is not your place to interfere. No, it is my place. That is my niece. You were not the one who had to calm her down last night, and she never told me about anything. I see it. I see the way that you coddle Sean and barely even look at Fia. I see the way you spoil Sean with everything he wants while you make the work so hard for everything she does. So? She's going to need these skills in the future. Might as well start learning them early on. So Sean doesn't need these skills? He does, but he already knows them. Are you sure? Because your grown son couldn't do the laundry himself when he does nothing all day. I'll bet that he purposely missed that interview because he'd much rather mooch off of you for the rest of his life than work. He used Fia as the scapegoat so you wouldn't get upset with him. How are you not seeing any of this? Listen, I know that Fia's your favorite, but that does not mean that you get to talk bad about Sean. You can believe whatever you want, but you don't live with us, and you have no idea how things work on the inside. If you're done yelling at me for nothing, you can leave. No, I'm here for Fia. What do you mean? She's going to live with me from here on. At least I'll be able to give her a better life than whatever you've been giving her. Ha! Good luck with that one. Don't come crying to me when you want her off your hands because I'm not taking her back in. You are a horrible father, and even more of a horrible man. Sean will screw you over one day, and then you'll realize how much you wronged Fia, and you'll feel sorry. Don't ever think that Fia will forgive you for it. Sean could never do anything wrong to me, and I'll live without Fia's forgiveness. Get her out as soon as you can, and let yourselves out. Dad turned around and walked back into the house. He and Aunt Vivian were having this conversation by the front door, and I was walking down the stairs at that point. So I heard the entire thing. I felt like a dagger went through my heart when my dad said all those mean things about me. Not only did he completely undermine all the hard work I did, but he also believed that Aunt Vivian would want to abandon me. Aunt Vivian noticed me and her anger softened. I walked over to her and she hugged me tightly. She silently took me back to her place where she sat me down and assured me that she would never abandon me. She apologized for never having done much for me before, but I told her she did more than she could ever have imagined. Aunt Vivian let me stay in for the rest of the week and took me out to a lot of places just to pamper me. I got a haircut, a lot of new clothes and shoes, a mani-pedi, and I got to eat all my favorite foods. The next thing that Aunt Vivian did for me was get me into therapy. After hearing me on the phone that day, she got scared out of her mind for me and asked me if I could talk about these things with a therapist. Of course I wanted to do it, and I slowly began to feel better. My life slowly started getting better after I started staying with Aunt Vivian. She helped me find a better job and made me work fewer hours. She was a lawyer, so she made more than enough money to sustain me and herself. She took care of me in every way she could. When it came time to go to college, she helped me find the best college for me and even paid for the entire thing. After I graduated, I found a good job and finally moved out of Aunt Vivian's place. Although I always made it a point to visit her every other day, I cannot even begin to express how grateful I am for everything she did. So I did my best to let her know in whatever little way I could. Before I knew it, 10 years had passed since my dad kicked me out. I mean, every now and then I would think about Dad and Sean, but never enough to actually make an effort to search for them. I knew who my real family was, and I kept her close to me. But then I got a call from an unknown caller. I didn't usually entertain those calls, but this number kept calling over and over again, so I picked up and was beyond surprised to hear my dad on the other side. Hello? Fia, sweetie, it's me, Dad. Oh, hey, what do you want? Nothing. I just wanted to check in on you. Are you doing okay? Cut to the chase, Dad. You need something. I don't want any of your fake concerns and care. Okay, fine. I need you to help me with something. Why don't you ask your precious Sean to help you out? That's the thing. He's the one I need to get away from. What? What do you mean? Please save me from your devil brother. I never knew that he was this bad. What are you going on about? After you left? You mean after you kicked me out? Fine, after I kicked you out. Sean became so much worse. He got harder and harder to be around because he would constantly lose his temper at the smallest things. Without you to take the fall, I was on the receiving end of it. At least you acknowledged that I was being treated badly by Sean. And then things got even worse. He got into some really bad company. I don't even know how. All I knew was that his friends were constantly over and they would sit in the basement for hours at a time. I don't see how that's a bad thing. Turns out they were doing drugs in there, like the very hard kind. Oh, wow. The thing is, somebody ratted out Sean's dealer and the police are looking into everyone who purchased from the dealer. Sean used my card several times to make transactions. And now I may become a suspect. And you expect me to help you out? How? I can't say anything to the police. Well, I told Sean that he had to take the fall if anything happened and he refuses to do it. He told me that he'd do anything to not go to prison, even if that meant purposely throwing me under the bus. I'm not surprised. You know you enabled this behavior in him and now it's come back to bite you in the worst way possible. I know, I was a horrible dad. I just need you to give me some money so I can get away from here. Turns out Sean used up all my money to fund his addiction. I have absolutely nothing to my name except for this house. You have to help me get out of here, please. I actually don't have to help you with anything. You made your decisions long ago and now you need to deal with them. Besides, I'm way too worthless to help you out. I said I was sorry. Well, sorry will never bring back the years of my life that I spent being tortured by you and Sean, will it? So you're just going to let your dad go to prison for a crime he didn't commit? You may not have committed the crime, but you definitely were involved in it. You taught Sean that you'd always let him get away with anything. You'd punish anyone but him for his wrongs. And now that you have no one to punish, you're the one that's going to face the consequences. I can't believe that you're turning your back on me when I most need it. You did the same to me. You told Aunt Vivian that you could live without my forgiveness, right? Then live by it. I don't owe you anything. You need to deal with the consequences of your horrible actions. I wish you nothing but luck. Never contact me again. Bye. I hung up on my dad after that and blocked his number. My hands were shaking. I couldn't believe what Dad told me. I mean, was there a chance that Dad was only making the entire thing up because Sean must have just been stealing from him and he needed a crazy enough excuse for me to send him money? Yeah. But Dad sounded so distressed over the phone that I couldn't help but think that whatever he was saying was true. I also didn't like how he involved me in his issue now. If the police did want to find him, I'd be on his contact list and I will be involved. I was happy not knowing where he was for the last 10 years, and even if I did get curious every once in a while about how he was doing, I never wanted him to reach out to me like this. The first thing I did after I spoke to Dad was go over to Aunt Vivian's and tell her what had happened. She was furious with Dad for not involving me in things and assured me that nothing bad would happen to me. She told me that if I ever get questioned, I need to ask her before answering anything and also to never try to contact my dad in any way. I wasn't planning on that anyway because I wanted nothing to do with that man. For the next few days I was racked with anxiety and paranoia. And then the police did eventually come to see me. Thankfully, Aunt Vivian decided to stay with me for a few weeks just in case something happened, so she was there with me. They told me that they had pulled out my dad's call records and that I was the second last person he talked to before he ran away. I told them in full detail about what the conversation was and also explained my history with him. The police got whatever they wanted out of me, thanked me, and left. I don't know where my dad secured the money he needed from, but truthfully, I didn't care. I was angry that, yet again, even after 10 years of no contact, Dad still managed to mess up my life. I was just glad that things were finally catching up to him and he was finally being taught a lesson. I don't know what happened to Dad, but I do know that Sean ended up getting arrested. He, too, called me crying, but I ended that conversation way quicker than I did with Dad. They proved themselves to be selfish men all over again, and I was prepared to leave them behind in the past. I'm still reeling from what had happened with Sean and my dad. I mean, I expected things to be bad for them, but never this bad. It took a while for me to be able to think of anything. But that, especially because there would be times when I felt guilty for not helping Dad out. But then I'd remind myself that he had no issue throwing his 16-year-old daughter out because she didn't satisfy his son's wants. That was enough to vanish the guilt. I've learned to put everything that happened in the past, especially because now I have the closure I always needed. I'm moving on to better things, and life has been treating me really well. I look forward to whatever else life has to throw my way. Thanks for listening.